I'm Victoria Jordan, and I think one of the oddities about me and the organic and natural and real food is that I'm older. I'm 76, and I have been gardening really probably 50 years. I'm not quite sure why, because organics at that time, you really didn't hear much about it. No one was concerned about what was in their food. I think in the 60s, there was a back to earth movement that I was really interested in. And so I never did use any of the pesticides and the fungicides and all of that. Sometimes it was economical because it costs money. I don't remember it being a philosophical decision at the time. As I learned more, it became more important to me. But I just really wanted the experience of growing my own food, of being sustainable, of feeding my family from what I grew. And when I was raising my family, there weren't near the fast foods. We sat down for dinner every night, which I think is a really missing component in our day and age of having time with your family. You ready?
My name is Sarah Withers, and my husband and I and our 3 little ones, we live in the West Valley of Phoenix, Arizona on a 2-acre homestead. We moved here with the intention of being able to grow our own food. It was really important to us. We were spending a considerable amount of money buying raw dairy and organic food products in our little townhouse in the city. We have 3 kids, 7, 5, and 1. Eating organically is important to our family. Over the years, we've kind of grown more and more into that as we've had a variety of health problems that have arisen, and we've turned to food as a source of healing. For us, 2 of my children actually have a quote-unquote dairy allergy. And all of us can't really tolerate regular milk from the grocery store, but we can do our raw milk from our cow and from our goats. And 2 of my children can only do the goat's milk, so we'll always have goats for that reason. It's really important to us, the amount of nutrition we're able to get from our dairy products. Similarly, with our produce, we buy organic. It's really important to us that we're getting things that are grown without pesticides and GMOs, and that actually nourish our bodies.
As far as your real food, and by real food, I mean unprocessed food. I don't necessarily mean you've walked in the garden and picked it. You can get real food from a lot of different sources. Real food meaning that it isn't processed, that you can pronounce the names that are in, as my daughter says, Mom, just tell them if they can't pronounce the name, don't eat it. As far as the misconception about organic, I don't know that I'm an expert on it, but from my reading, I think that people think it's expensive, first of all.
So when people think of organic, they tend to think of it being expensive and out of reach for your average person. We have found that not to be the case, especially if we're able to buy ingredients either from farmers around us or grow it ourselves. And the investment that we're putting into our food ends up saving us so much money compared to going to the doctors frequently or dealing with other health problems.
I see so many young families, when the few times I go out to restaurants, it's expensive. If they can afford to buy a family dinner out at a restaurant, organic is definitely within their budget.
I think part of it is, are you making food from scratch or are you buying a processed food? Processed foods, especially processed organic foods, are expensive. If you're able to source ingredients, that doesn't have to be expensive at all. We also feel like it's an investment into our health of our family. And so that doesn't feel expensive to us when you're comparing it with doctor's bills.
I will tell you, I have a daughter who was diagnosed. I mean, she did have pancreatic cancer last year, and fortunately it was caught and she went through surgery. It's called Whipple surgery, where they removed about 50% of her pancreas, 50% of her liver, her stomach, and her colon. So her digestion is not what it should be. And she has gone to raw milk. She's gone to no processed foods whatsoever. She had a nutritionist tell her, do not eat any processed foods whatsoever for her health. I think it's just a matter of education, or them knowing the difference between organic and not organic, what actually is in the non-organic. I mean, things like, corn's a big issue with GMOs. Soybeans is another big issue with GMOs. But even if it's not GMO, what are the fungicides, pesticides, Roundup? But that is in the food chain. We don't know what all of that might be the results of some of that being in our system. I think it's actually my grandchildren's generation that has been most affected by it. But, and I see health issues that I don't have in younger people. I see, dietary intolerances that I don't have. I don't know why. It's just that there weren't a lot of chemicals around to eat, and now a lot of people have them.
I feel like this is an area that we can change the world, starting with our families. It can certainly change the trajectory of your family life. But it doesn't have to be this huge, grandiose thing. You can start really small by having a little tiny garden, maybe grow something in a pot with your kids and get to enjoy that process together and learn about where food comes from together. And then being a part of a community aspect with that is huge. Just getting to take your kids to a community garden or be in an environment where they are able to see raw ingredients for things and how they come together to make a meal or to make a smoothie or to make a loaf of bread, whatever that looks like. That is it's a great journey to be on as a family.
When I moved here to Arizona, having land was just really a dream kind of that I had hoped for. And I think it's important to grow your own food in that you know where it came from, what's happened to it. I think it's the availability, you eat seasonally.
I started my first garden right as I was pregnant with my second daughter. So that was 6 years ago. It was just a teeny tiny little garden in my backyard of my townhouse. And that was a really important thing for me for our health. I grew some things for our family to eat, and that was special, but also for my mental health. I had postpartum depression after she was born, and getting to spend time in the garden was really healing for me. And then since we've moved, I've been gardening every year since. And Victoria is a huge inspiration to me on that. And she teaches me a lot about what I can grow here. And it's really astonishing what you can grow in Arizona. It's not a desert wasteland after all.
So if you're able to start a garden, I think that's great. But if you don't have the room for a garden, I think, like I was asked to go to a grammar school once and try to bring, my farm to the school. So what I did is I grew some potatoes in a bucket, and I grew carrots in a bucket or a pot, which you can just put out on out on the condo patio if you just have a small place.
This was a huge thing for us, is we want our kids to know where their food comes from, whether it's coming from the garden or from an animal. And so they've been a part of that whole process as much as they want to be. And usually they really want to be a part of that. And it's important for us that our kids have a healthy relationship with food. And I think part of that is knowing, where does food come from? Does it come in a box? Does it come in a cellophane wrapped piece of meat from the grocery store? Where does it come from?
It does have to matter to you. Basically it does have to matter to you. A lot of people, it doesn't matter what food they eat, or, how they prepare it or how they get it. And it's a choice more than letting life push you around, whereas you make the choice what you do with your life.
Getting kids to learn how to cook is just so crucial and important. And we're raising up the next generation of people. So if we can give them those tools that they can, provide for themselves in a certain way and provide for their one-day families, and also just have that kind of visceral relationship with their food.
But as far as getting your kids to cook with you, that's a big question because it does take some patience. Particularly if you only have a set amount of time to get dinner. You're coming home from work and you're tired so I'd say put it aside for the weekend where you have a little bit more time. And set aside, if you have a list of priorities, put it on your list.
Kids are so much more excited about eating something if they've helped in the growing of it or the preparing of it. And they have such a natural curiosity and love to just get their hands dirty in making food.
Buy carrots and cut them up and cook them with your kids. I mean, it doesn't take much to make good carrots. Cutting the carrots up, warming a saute pan with butter, letting the carrots saute, put a little honey in it, and you have a great dish right there. Or even roast them, that's even easier.
I absolutely think we need a place to gather around this concept of real food and bring that to the community in a new way. There's really nothing like that in the West Valley.
I think a place where a community can gather together is a terrific idea over food, over a place to learn, a place to experiment, a place to taste. 10 years ago, people were not eating goat cheese. Now it's somewhat within the realm of common. It's still a little way out there, but a place to taste those things so people can figure out what they like. But the idea of community in learning from one another, of sharing ideas.
There are an abundance of small farms around here, though, and to have a kind of central location for people to gather and share what they're growing or what they are interested in learning to grow.
It feeds the binds. It feeds the relationships. It's not just food, but it's a time that you'll be gathered together and see one another and talk to one another and just see what's happening in one another's lives.
That would be a really amazing spot, for sure.
It's just really nice to pass on knowledge. And a pleasure shared is a pleasure multiplied. And so it's really a gift to me when someone can enjoy what you enjoy with you. That's it.